Hello everybody, my name is Eduardo and I'm presenting the Uyghurs in Concentration Camps in China campaign. This campaign aims to bring information and data about what is happening to the Uyghurs community in China through the use of illustrations, satire and mockery. The Uyghurs are a Turkic ethnic group that is mostly located in Xinjiang, the largest region in China, northwestern part of the country. The Uyghurs are in large part Muslims and they speak their own language, which is similar to Turkish. In 2018, a UN Human Rights Committee stated that they had evidence around 1 million Uyghurs that were forcibly detained in so-called re-education camps. This sparked outrage around the entire world. For example, the US called the recent actions taken by China against the local Muslim community a genocide. So moving on to my stance for about design for change. Design has always been a tool used to change the way we think or perceive aspects of life. It is important to set key principles and ideas that can guide design ethically. The issue we encounter is what we identify as ethical is not necessarily what other people identify as ethical. This issue is partially solved by a community that takes at heart the idea of changing for the better, and the spread of the information eliminates filters and intermediary figures that could interfere with the objective of the campaign. I personally agree with the idea of making the world better, utilizing the power of design. But I also do believe that it starts from the idea that Western societies know what is right and wrong. Looking outside the Western canon helps to formulate a better strategy when approaching other cultures and communities in order to not disrespect them or having the opposite results from what previously hoped for. This to say that there is an aspect of interior battles that designers have to deal with when approaching societal battles which is having a set of beliefs that we have to accept as a starting point in order to do this job. If a universal set of morals will ever be found by science or anything else, then the designer jobs will be easier. The stakeholders of the campaign can be divided into two main categories. The first is the newspapers and magazine readers. The aim of this campaign will be to work mainly with the New Yorker, which is known to dedicate part of their resources to satirical content and have a large following on social media, with an Instagram page potentially reaching 5.6 million followers. The second audience that the campaign is focused on is unaware but digitally active people aged between 16 to 30 years old. So what is satire? Satire is a device that holds human societies up to criticism and ridicule. Satire has its origin in ancient times. The word is derived from the word satur, which is a Latin word that means well-fed or full, and it was used often by Roman critics to refer to what we know nowadays as satire. Satire and comedy have always been used to spark ideas in an indirect way. When the audience understands a clever and intricate joke, tend to retain information in an easier way. Comedy has been used to ridicule or embarrass governments and policies and have making serious changes in the way people perceive them. The channel Vox recently uploaded a video explaining how satirical shows like The Real Time with Bill Maher or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver have managed to do the work that journalists were supposed to do during the infamous Trump era, as satire managed to trigger our common sense or ridicule our own fanatic beliefs. Satire is essential to maintain a stable relationship between the way we perceive the outside world and our own personal lives or small communities. Satire has a dark side too, and it's important to be careful and learn how to contextualize past historical examples of satirical content, as oftentimes it might fall under the category of propaganda, meaning that regimes used what could be seen as satire to destroy and humiliate smaller communities. The relationship between Islam and satire has been a topic of discussion within the news media worldwide for the past few years after the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris. The discussion quickly moved from the representation of the Prophet to French secularism and freedom of speech. The reason why mentioning this is important is because part of the stakeholders of this campaign are relatively young Muslims, so it is important to understand how satire and cartoon will be perceived when the subject of the caricature is not Islam and Muslims, but the Chinese government. Obviously, not all Muslims have issues with satire. There are almost 2 billion Muslims in the world, but the intellectual conversation and the constant conflation between the religion and terrorism that was broadcasted on news channels and podcasts might have pushed several Muslims away from cartoons and satire that have nothing to do with Islam in general. The second ethical issue that sparks from this campaign is race and ethnicity representation through illustrations or caricatures. Easter Asians have been multiple times victims of negative stereotyping, like the Japanese soldier and immigrants during the beginning of the century, or Chinese people, which would be the Uyghurs, the subject of the illustrations. Issues like the use of certain words or religious symbols will also be topics to pay a lot of attention to, as the aim in this case is to inform and not to intentionally offend anybody, which does mean it won't happen eventually, but the context and intention of this campaign are not to hurt and disrespect cultures. So moving on to considering the shock value aspect of past campaigns, I took an example from the United Colors of Benetton and their campaign made by Oliviero Toscani. Luciano Benetton, an Italian entrepreneur, founded the Benetton Group in the 60s. In the 80s, the brand started working with photographer Oliviero Toscani, who created a series of highly controversial campaigns through the use of satire and photography. Ebony and Ivory is a famous example. In 1982, Benetton showcased an image of two young girls hugging each other. One is black and the other is white. The white girl is smiling, she's blonde with curls, and reminds of how angels were represented, especially in the Middle Ages. The black girl is not smiling, her hair is styled as such as it looks like she has devil horns. The image was highly criticized for perpetuating racist stereotypes separating skin colors between good and evil. This could also be interpreted as the photographer wanted to use the shock value in order to make the audience reflect on the way people approach the issue of race in Western civilization. The image might be racist or might ask the audience, do you judge individuals based on their skin colors, even when they're young, harmless girls hugging each other? This campaign made me think about how to approach certain topics and how there is a shock reward system in place in the world of advertisement, meaning that an ad might sacrifice its own brand values in order to sit on the hotspot, even without wanting to harm individuals or communities. This might drive up sales or might destroy the reputation of the company, or both. Moving on to other examples of satirical work. In this case, we're talking about John Holcroft. John Holcroft is a known illustrator from Britain. He worked for several media outlets like BBC, The Guardian, and the Financial Times, and many others. His satirical illustration became viral multiple times across social media and tabloids. The style of the illustration is based on advertisement from the 50s, from the style up to the grain layer effect added on top to add the vintage feel. Holcroft has dealt with multiple subjects from drug use, sexism, devaluation of workers, and capitalistic society's obsession with money. Moving on to taking in consideration other campaigns outside the Western canon. Satire has many forms, from cartoons to shows on television. Nigeria has always had covert form of satire, but it's developing a more open way to mock government and politicians. Fela Kuti is famous not only for his music capabilities, but for constantly mock the military actions of his country and his politicians. The artist who made album covers for Kuti, Lemi Garioku, has made satirical content and placed in front of the violence of one of the most famous African artists of all time. Mike Asuko's cartoons are very effective and had an advantage compared to other satirical work by artists outside Western societies. The content is written in English. This made these cartoons the ability to travel throughout the Anglo-speaking world. One of the issues researching other examples of satirical content was the inability for me to understand the subjects of the jokes. Since the topic touched are often serious, I didn't want to promote or shine lights to something I don't understand that could have been highly inappropriate, even though I would have loved to research Middle Eastern satirical work, for example. So the social media campaign. The campaign will make use of social media as one of the mediums to connect with the younger generation, which has a higher engagement with content and would help spread the cartoons. Even though social media represent a massive group of individuals, a lot of companies and entities in general are competing to grab a portion of this digital group. In this case, the New Yorker has a large following already, but the objective is to reach as many people as possible, taking advantage of some of the features social media like Instagram offers, like the use of hashtags or the explore page within the platform. Some of the satirical content will be then uploaded on different social media available to drive traffic towards the topic and towards the newspaper as well. The audience for Uyghurs in concentration camps in China campaign is represented by the people targeted through social media, therefore young people from the age 16 to 30. The reason is that younger portion of this group is more active and engaging on social media due to several reasons. They were born into the social media era and they, relatively speaking, have more free time to spend on these platforms. The older portion of this group is relatively less engaging, but has the cultural tools to understand the satirical content and may have the financial capabilities to help donate and actively participate in the campaign. The other group targeted by the campaign is the New Yorker readers that care less about the shock value behind the satirical content, but has the cultural tools to understand it and appreciate it. Conclusion. The objective of this campaign is to inform magazine and newspaper readers of the horrible conditions and treatment of the ethnic group, the Uyghurs, and to influence non-magazine newspaper readers through posts on social media showcasing the original illustrations and artworks. The aim is to inform unaware individuals using humor in order to humanize the victims of this tragedy. Satire is obviously used not to mock the victims, but the perpetrators. The illustrations and images will be free to see through social media and to use to spread ideas across different platforms. Thank you for listening.